Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another chapter of history. Today, we're heading east to ancient China, the Zhou dynasty to be exact.
The Zhou dynasty, a fascinating case study.
It really is. Now, we're working from one particularly captivating podcast episode today, which got me thinking.
Just one.
Yeah. It's amazing how one well-crafted story can transport you through time. Anyway, this episode dives deep into the Zhou dynasty, those rulers famous for their epic rise and, well, their equally epic downfall.
Right, the cyclical nature of power. A tale as old as time.
Exactly. So, like many great dynasties, the Zhou started with, let's call it a golden age, right? Kings Cheng and Kang, now those guys knew how to lead, or at least that's what history tells us.
It does. The Qing-Kang prosperity, that wasn't just a catchy phrase. It reflected a period of genuine peace and progress.
Right. And you can't talk about the Zhou's success without mentioning the man, the myth, the Duke of Zhou.
Yes, a pivotal figure indeed.
So he was King Cheng's uncle, right? Acted as regent while Cheng was still a youngster.
That's right. A wise and steady hand guiding the young king.
And he laid the groundwork for all that prosperity we were talking about.
He did, but it wasn't just luck, you see. The Duke, he had this firm belief in a strong moral foundation for governing. Ritual, respect for hierarchy, social harmony. These were his pillars, and they resonated deeply with the people.
Interesting. So strong leadership rooted in philosophy, that's what set the stage for the Zhou's early success.
It certainly played a crucial role.
But then along comes King Zhao, and let's just say he had a slightly different leadership style, more into pheasant hunting than ruling. Is that right?
Well, King Zhao's reign certainly marked a shift, a turning point perhaps. He became rather infamous for his, let's say, fascination with white pheasants, particularly those found in the state of Chu.
Okay, so set the scene for me here. What's the big deal with these white pheasants? Why were they such a big deal to King Zhao?
It's tied to the concept of the Son of Heaven, a title bestowed upon the Zhou kings. They were considered divinely appointed rulers.
Okay, divinely appointed, so their right to rule. It wasn't just about, well, being born into the right family.
So precisely. It was tied to this idea of the mandate of heaven, this belief that their legitimacy stemmed from their virtue, their ability to maintain harmony and act in accordance with the cosmos.
So the Son of Heaven, the mandate of heaven,
Yeah.
These are key concepts for understanding the Zhou dynasty. Got it.
Exactly. So as the Son of Heaven, King Zhao felt entitled to these white pheasants, seeing them as a symbol of his status and power.
So what did he do? Demand them as tribute from Chu.
You guessed it. He demanded these white pheasants as tribute from Chu, a state not entirely under Zhou control, might I add. And when Chu basically ignored him, well, let's just say it didn't go down too well with King Zhao. His pride took a bit of a hit.
I can imagine. Sounds like he wasn't used to being told no. So what did he do? Send in the troops.
He did. Decided to make a grand show of force, marching his army south to, as they say, teach Chu a lesson. And this is where we start to see those first cracks in the facade of the Zhou dynasty's power.
This journey south doesn't sound like it went so well, does it? The podcast episode, it mentioned something about stolen boats and, well, a less than glorious ending for the king.
It did not go well. In fact, it turned into a bit of a disaster. They had to commandeer, or perhaps steal is the better word, boats from local fishermen just to cross a river.
And I'm guessing the fishermen weren't too thrilled about that.
They were not. But to make matters worse, the king's men, they weren't exactly gentle with the boats. They damaged them, left them unusable.
Talk about adding insult to injury. Stealing from the people you're supposed to be ruling. Not exactly a winning strategy, is it?
It really highlights that growing disconnect between the ruler and the ruled. A king stealing from commoners, even damaging their livelihoods in the process. Well, it certainly made people question things.
And remember, this is the Son of Heaven we're talking about. I can only imagine the whispers that must have started circulating after that little incident. So he got his precious pheasants then, huh? I mean, after all that, did Chu finally give in?
Oh, they did, eventually. Those white pheasants, they were delivered. But the victory, well, it's pretty short-lived.
Our office. What happened? Those boats finally give out on the way back.
You could say that. Karma, as they say. Well, they patched up those boats as best they could, but yeah, mid-river, they fell apart.
No way! He actually drowned. A king. That's wild.
The Son of Heaven, humbled by a few glued-together boats, imagine that. Of course, they tried to hush it up, said he died of an illness, but come on.
Everyone knows the real story.
Exactly, and it definitely left its mark. I mean, if the mandate of heaven could be undone by something like that, well, it made people wonder, didn't it?
About the whole divine right. thing, right? Like, maybe these kings, they aren't so untouchable after all.
You got it. It's a story that really captures the power dynamics of the time. The king, despite all his authority, he wasn't immune to the consequences of his actions.
Such a fascinating period. Okay, so after King Zhao and his unfortunate demise, who takes the reins, what happens next in this Zhou dynasty saga?
So there's a bit of a reprieve under King Xuan, a brief period of stability.
Okay.
But then we get to King Lai, and, well, let's just say he didn't quite learn from his predecessor.
Oh, no, not another ruler with a penchant for, let's say, questionable decisions.
No.
What was King Lai's downfall?
Greed, plain and simple. He saw the kingdom as his own personal treasure chest, endless riches just waiting to be plundered.
And the people, I'm guessing they weren't too keen on this approach.
Not so much. This is where that whole communication by sight thing comes in. People were terrified to speak out against him.
Because of the spies, right? I remember that detail from the podcast.
Yeah, King Lai, he was paranoid, convinced everyone was plotting against him. So he had these spies everywhere listening for any hint of dissent.
Can you imagine living like that? Always looking over your shoulder, afraid to even whisper your true thoughts.
It was a suffocating time. And the taxes, don't even get me started on the taxes.
This was worse than just the pheasants, huh?
Way worse. He slapped taxes on everything. Hunting, taxed. Fishing, taxed. Cutting down a tree, taxed. You breathed, you paid.
He really put the tax in taxing, didn't he? So what did they do? Did anyone try to, reason with him? Tell him to maybe cool it with the whole bleeding the kingdom dry thing?
His ministers, they tried. They warned him that the people were at a breaking point. But he ignored them, blinded by his own greed.
Classic case of power corrupting, right? It's like he couldn't even see what was right in front of him.
Exactly. And eventually, well, that silence, that communication by sight, it couldn't hold forever. The tension finally snapped.
What happened? Did they finally find their voices?
They did, and it wasn't pretty. The revolt of the people, they called it, the people of the capital, they'd had enough. They stormed the palace.
No way. They actually revolted. That's incredible. What happened to King Lai? So he lost his throne. King Lai?
Yeah.
What a turn of events.
He did, but he managed to escape, fled the city with the angry mob hot on his heels.
Ironic, isn't it? That he owed his escape to the very people who tried to warn him.
It really is. His own ministers, the voices he'd so easily dismissed, they ended up saving him from the consequences of his own actions. He spent 14 years in exile, by the way.
14 years. Wow, what a way to spend a decade and a half. I wonder if he ever regretted his choices during those years. All that greed, all that power. For what?
It's a question for the ages, isn't it? But, while King Li was off contemplating his fate, something pretty remarkable happened back in the capital.
Oh, what's that?
Remember the crown prince? The one who would have been next in line for the throne, the target of all that pent-up anger?
Right, of course. He was just a kid, wasn't he? What happened to him?
He was whisked away, hidden by one of those loyal ministers we were talking about, the Duke of Zhao.
Okay, so the Duke who valued, what was it? Ritual respect.
Exactly. And he put those values into action, even when it meant defying the mob, even when it meant putting himself in incredible danger.
So what did he do? Hide the prince away in his own home?
He did more than that. When the rebels surrounded his estate, demanding the prince, the Duke, he made an unimaginable sacrifice.
He did.
He offered up his own son in the prince's place. A substitution, you see, to protect the Zhou lineage.
Wow. Talk about putting the good of the dynasty above everything else, even family. That is some serious loyalty.
It's a testament to the power of belief, isn't it? The Duke, he truly believed in the Zhou, in their right to rule, in their potential for greatness.
And this act, this sacrifice, it paved the way for King Xuan's eventual rise to power, right?
It did. The crown prince, presumed dead, he eventually returned, took his rightful place on the throne.
And ushered in that period of stability, that revival under King Xuan that we talked about earlier. It's like something out of a play, a story of betrayal, sacrifice, and ultimately redemption.
Life imitating art, perhaps. But the story of the Zhou, it doesn't end there, does it?
Sadly, no. There's still King Yu and, well, his infamous infatuation with Bao Si to get to.
A tale for the ages, indeed.
It is. And that's where our single source today, that captivating podcast episode, really shines. It paints such a vivid picture of this king, so consumed by beauty, so desperate to win over his indifferent queen, that he ended up making a mockery of his own kingdom.
It's a classic case of a leader blinded by love, or perhaps by infatuation. The need to possess, to conquer, it can cloud even the most rational mind.
So true. So tell me about this Bao Si. Who was she? What made her so captivating, so irresistible to King Yu?
She was known for her extraordinary beauty, that much is clear, but she was also incredibly reserved, distant. She rarely smiled, which, ironically, only seemed to fuel King Yu's desire to win her over.
The thrill of the chase, right? It's like he was determined to break through her icy exterior to be the one to finally earn her affection.
Perhaps, but this wasn't just some harmless infatuation. This was a king willing to sacrifice his kingdom, his reputation, everything for a chance to see a smile on this woman's face.
And this is where that beacon prank comes in, right?
Yeah.
The story that perfectly encapsulates King Yu's folly.
Exactly. Now, you have to understand, the Zhou capital, it was surrounded by these beacon towers, a system of warning signals used to summon allies in case of an attack.
Okay, a kind of ancient bat signal.
You could say that. But King Yu, in his infinite wisdom, decided to make a mockery of this vital defense system, all for the amusement of Bao Si.
He really lit the beacons as a prank.
Okay.
Knowing that it would send his allies scrambling to his aid, only to find, what? Nothing.
Exactly. The Allied lords, they saw the signal, they mobilized their troops, rushed to defend the capital, only to find it was all a cruel joke, a spectacle stage for the entertainment of a king and his reluctant queen.
I can only imagine the outrage. Can you imagine being one of those lords, duped, humiliated, your trust completely shattered?
It was a disastrous move. Strategically and diplomatically, it undermined King Yu's authority, made him look weak, indecisive, untrustworthy.
Did he learn his lesson?
Not a chance. He repeated the prank, not once, not twice, but multiple times.
He was really that determined to get a laugh out of this one.
It would seem so. But his laughter, it wouldn't last long. You see, while King Yu was busy with his charades, a real threat was emerging.
Who were they?
The Quanrong, a nomadic group, long considered a thorn in the side of the Zhou, they saw their opportunity amidst the chaos and seized it.
So when the real attack came, when the beacons were lit in earnest, no one believed it.
Precisely. The boy who cried wolf, or rather, the king who cried invasion.
What a way to go down in history. So what happened? Did they overrun the capital?
They did. The Quanrong, they sacked the capital, King Yu was killed, Bao Si vanished into the chaos, and the Zhou dynasty, well, they never fully recovered.
Wow, what a story. From golden age to utter collapse, and all because of, what? Pheasants, greed, a beautiful woman with a reluctant smile.
It's a reminder, isn't it, that power, it's a fickle thing, and that even the mightiest empires that can crumble, often from within, eroded by their own internal contradictions, their own inability to learn from the mistakes of the past.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the stories we tell about ourselves, the legacies we leave behind. The Zhou dynasty, they may be long gone, but their story, it still resonates, still holds valuable lessons for us today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning from the echoes of the past.
Well said. The Zhou dynasty, a cautionary tale, a reminder that history, it has a way of repeating itself if we don't pay attention.